December 11th, 2018. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, looks like we have 5 items on the agenda here. I don't know who wants to tackle each topic. Dr. Shortupley, you're probably the most familiar with all of these.
Yes, and we do have Mrs. Crump here tonight to also lend some assistance with a couple of these policies. But the first item is just a continuation of the policy 246 pre-approved list of outside food items, which does fall underneath the wellness policy. In speaking with Mr. Lorenzo, he has forwarded an updated pre-approved list of food, including approved outside snacks and ingredients for everyone to have as part of the ARs for policy 246. So we did want to just make this known to everyone. We've had an ongoing list over the last several months that has been updated. He has been in constant communication with a number of parents who have been involved and who have spoken at previous board meetings. So you will see this information listed. I do believe either Bonnie or Janet will be posting this information.
All right, so anybody in the public can
Yep,
look
they
at the
can
list,
look at this.
critique it, say, hey,
Absolutely.
my child has this allergy and this allergy. There's still nothing on the list maybe that would
You got it.
accommodate. And obviously, this is an effort to further expand the options.
We're continuing to hear from our parents, our constituents, so if we have something else that is brought forward to assist and help, especially with the upcoming holiday season and parties, we're going to get that information out to the parents.
Is this going to have to be on display?
No, this is the administrative regulation, so we could simply add those to replace the old ones.
Okay.
Personally, I'd just like to acknowledge that I find it comical that somebody actually had to type several times here, swirly strawberry, really peely fruit tape.
Let's say that 4 times, 3 times. Yes.
How many years of college and this is what I'm typing?
So, I mean, if you read through this, you can see the different snacks.
It's a lot bigger list than what we initially
Yes. Mm-hmm.
started with, so that's a good move.
So we have been constantly meeting with parents, emails back and forth. I've been attached to those. It's a.
And all this nutritional information will be available as well?
Yep,
Okay.
all there. So from where we were at, I think you can see how this has evolved the way we wanted it to get more information back from the parents and to get this information into our board policy and ARs.
Is it going just to the elementary, is it going to all go to all?
All. So if we don't have any questions on that one, we're going to move to the unlawful harassment, and this is policy 248 with students and also policy 348 with employees. Myself, Dr. Chakey, and Mrs. Bungard attended down at the IU a Title IX workshop. And with that presentation, we were somewhat surprised with some of the information that's coming out from the IU and eventually our solicitor, indicating that we need to maybe beef up some of this policy. And one thing that they did bring up was, and I had a conversation with Mrs. Crump earlier today about all-inclusive, where we have the students, we have our employees, but also they want to ensure that school board members as well. There is a policy that relates to school board if there is an alleged harassment claim against a school board member or vice versa. So that was something that kind of caught us off guard, is to say, okay, maybe we need to take a look at this policy to ensure that we have inclusive, not only students, employees, but school board as well.
Yeah, anybody touching the district at any rate.
You got it. So with the board's understanding, we're going to be going through this to make those changes necessary. Run it, of course, with the solicitor, then bring it back here and put it on for display. Trish, anything else that I've included in there? I believe North Allegany's and Pine Richland's policy. They seem to be a little bit more updated than ours a year or two.
Yes.
And they were at that policy meeting as well, and former Gateway administrator Mike Pasquinelli was there. He was the principal at the high school and also at Cleveland Stewart Elementary, and said that they went through some issues with harassment in Title IX, especially with some gender issues. So do you remember in the media, in the news concerning that? So they have stiffened their policy, so we're in a way, we'll get together as a administrative team and kind of tweak this, but it is some interesting reading to see how they use some terminology.
Good. Out there.
It's out there, absolutely, but it does fall underneath Title IX. And one of the things that I've noticed in our policy, and we do have a Title IX officer, and that is Dr. Dennis Chakey. We've identified him. I'm going to make that language explicit within our policy as well, because it does not say Title IX officer, and I believe it should. Because it does say that the superintendent shall designate who will conduct the investigation. All of this falls under Title IX, so Dr. Chakey will then lead the investigation. Do we have any questions on this? I was surprised to hear, as was really the whole group in attendance, how Title IX is now wrapping around a lot of this policy with harassment.
A lot of our issues too is with the social media, with the harassment.
Yes.
And the bullying.
And that's going to fall into our next policy with bullying and cyberbullying.
Okay,
Yeah.
now let me ask a question real quick before we get into that. How is it that 7-8 building, Mr. Talley, is able to limit when the telephones are used through the kids? They're not on.
It is no different at the 7-8 building than at the high school. It starts with the teacher,
Correct.
meaning if that teacher deems that no cell phones, they're off, they're away, everyone should comply. Now, I will say, as you get older, those things become a little bit more difficult to police. However, it starts with that teacher.
So if, I'm just putting it out there, I don't know anybody else's feelings, but if they are able to handle it, you don't have as many issues at the 7-8 building when all the kids do have their cell phones as we do at the high school. Is there anything that we can do to enforce it more going through the teacher?
Two trains of thought here, okay?
You
And
know where I'm going.
one idea has been, do you remember the old sleeves that would maybe hang in the classroom wall with pocket calculators? I've seen teachers, and we do have them up at the high school, who utilize those as, you know, once you get into that structure and routine, as the kids come into class,
Automatic.
they have slot number one, they put them in. At the end of the day or period, you take them out. That is something that we can look at. Perhaps.
I understand.
You know where I'm thinking.
I understand what you're saying. My concern is, you know, parents can say, well, I need to get in touch with my child.
That's the, yeah.
But here's the thing, that's why we have the secretaries, we have the calls going in, they can call in. I mean, everybody speak up,
Some
whatever.
of these phones are now, as we know, smartphones, and when I say everybody has them,
Correct.
every kid has them. The teachers have apps on those to use as what I used to call, we called them eggs. They were clickers, meaning every kid would have their egg. A question would be posed on the board, checking for understanding from the teacher. Every student would have to respond. The teacher would see the responses based off of everyone in the classroom. Now there's apps on the iPhones that the teachers use. The teachers also instruct the kids that they have their folders, similar to us within our smartphones, where they will take a picture of the presentation either on the board or smartboard, download that into a file as their note-taking structures, so they're able to access those notes from home. So that's kind of,
It can still go into their backpack as far as what the teachers are doing.
Yes.
They could put everything there. I'm just trying to look at a way to eliminate maybe a small portion of what happens in a classroom.
I totally
And
agree.
like you said, it starts with the teacher.
Yes. Here's a different train of thought. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong, because this is a brand new, I shouldn't say brand new, but this is an ever
Uncharted territory.
evolving uncharted
Right.
area. Recently, I constantly reading different ideas and thoughts on different areas of interest with education. And I ran across the coach for the Golden State Warriors. He played for Golden State, and I can't think of his name right now. But he was running into the problem at halftime with his athletes, which are predominantly 22 to maybe 28 years old, that they were constantly going right into the locker room on their phones while they're conducting a halftime session meeting.
Which are intense sometimes.
Very much so.
Coach needs your attention.
So what he established was, okay, he can't fight it, okay? So he said, I'm giving everyone, when they walk in that locker room, you got 2 minutes, and they put a clock up there on that wall.
Yep.
You got 2 minutes, do whatever you need to do on your media, your contacts, whoever you're doing. That 2 minutes is up, those phones go in a slot. It worked. It met the requirement of the players were happy, the coach had their attention, because he found in those 2 minutes, the coaches were always, you know how the coaches get together right before halftime.
They have to plan what they're
They
about
have
to
to,
say.
then
at
they go
halftime.
into the players.
That's right.
So he said, that's your time. When we walk in the room, it's done, when that clock hits. So I met with the principals and said, think about that for a moment. Say there is a 2-minute period within that classroom that the kids use their phones. Will it work? I don't know. We're just thinking out loud here.
I had a comment or a question about what you said a few minutes ago about teachers utilizing the fact that all the kids in the classroom have a smartphone.
Yes.
And I understand that when we say everybody has them, I think we all acknowledge that that's not 100% accurate.
Right.
That there are kids that don't have them, that they don't have the means to have them, or they simply, their parents don't want them to have them. And my concern is that we're leaving those kids out of an important tool.
Learning, yes.
If we're using technology to further their education that we're not providing the technology for, I think there's a bit of an equity problem there, and that concerns me. I like the creativity and getting them to engage and finding a way that they obviously
Yes.
will engage through. But I just worry about the kids that we're leaving out.
Yes, and without knowing all the facts in this situation, I would be pretty safe to say that our teachers would be cognizant if somebody didn't have access to that phone, that they would make an accommodation if they were using it for, that checking for understanding.
Right.
But yes, I agree with you. We do not want to limit a student from using a device that everyone else may have for a learning opportunity or to enhance their note-taking abilities or
And,
whatever.
we've had conversations before, I think all of us have, about, the whole cell phone issue. I think I fall into a little more of the old school category, where I personally would rather see just outright none. You know what I mean? If you need a device, it's got to be something that's in the school property, that's used by the students for technology, and I'm fine with that. And I understand the the logistics of how untenable it becomes when you literally just have somebody working, just taking phones and giving them back. But I also feel like, if there's a purpose behind a rule, and it's for the good of the students and for the good of the district, the fact that so many students are going to overlook it and just kind of bum rush the gate, if you will, I don't think is a legitimate reason to just eliminate the rule. You know what I mean? So I think maybe we can apply, you're looking at creative solutions for accommodating phones in the building. I think we need to maybe look at some creative solutions and keeping them out. without tying down, resources and time.
And one of the solutions that I know is in place, teachers will utilize the red light, green light, yellow light, kind of like a stoplight, where if you walk into, say, Mrs. Marasco's room, which I know this is a fact, that she will have a red light up there, meaning there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to have your phone out. If she sees it, she takes it. Okay? Starts with the teacher.
Exactly.
Some teachers, if it's yellow light, that indicates only when it's authorized by the teacher, and that teacher will do so periodically to bring it out. Some teachers are a little more relaxed than others.
She said it starts with the top and works down. I mean, this isn't the first time like we brought this up, and that's why I just think we're seeing more and more of it. I don't know what everybody else's feelings are, and I know what's gonna come from the public if this would come out. I mean, it's televised, but we're talking about this, trying to find a solution, so we're not.
Yeah, there's no decisions being made here.
No, this is
Exactly.
all,
Kind of
we're all just
Exactly.
kind of brainstorming.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I will say this, that there have been, most recent report, ABC News, and you could Google this, did a little research pilot study where they pulled in, I want to say 15 13-year-old girls. 13 would be what age? Grade 7th, roughly.
Sounds right.
And gave them, and it's online. Of course, I sent it to my daughter, and she didn't like it, but a 2-week cease and desist, eliminate your apps, all social media. And then they gauged the kids afterwards on how did you feel? Nervous, anxious at first. They've never been away from the social media. However, they found themselves more engaged with family at dinner, family at night. They slept better because they weren't thinking about what someone posted on social media, and found themselves in a healthier frame of mind. Almost to a person, everyone agreed. These are 13-year-olds, and you could watch it on ABC News. That in itself shows you that we are reaching epidemic proportions here with the amount of time our adolescents, young kids, who were born into this social media, cell phone craze, are online, and it's affecting their well-being.
All right, so I'm taking some notes here. Dr. Short, you have wandered around this topic. I mean, the topic we're supposed to be talking about is unlawful harassment. And then
Well,
we
then-
deviated
on
Yeah, and it
cyberbullying.
led to
teaching
the online
protocols,
bullying.
cyberbullying,
Yes.
technology, versions of software,
This is all
applications, pockets on the...
cyberbullying,
Right,
yeah.
and so now you've already,
Yes.
you found a way to come back to it perfectly, I think. So,
Which means there's no true answer to this issue.
Solution, I mean,
so since I agree with you
Mhm.
that children can do better by learning by having the discipline to not use the cell phone at times and then to use it only when they're supposed to, what can we do to adjust our policy to put that accommodation capability in there for the teachers, the information technologists, the district, and the parents?
And I think you hit the nail perfectly by saying moderation is important.
Okay,
And within classrooms, it needs to be addressed what is allowed, what is not allowed, when's the time to utilize these. Rick hit it, I mean, you said it perfectly. When phones were becoming the vogue thing and almost every child was bringing those to school, we filled the safe with phones. And it just became
too much.
too much, because then you have to have a parent come up, sign out, got the phone back.
I made lots of jokes.
Too many to control. So then school districts got together through the IU and said, okay, how can we evolve this into a digital age to allow our students to have access? Because parents wanted that communication due to the ongoing or immediacy of school situations, shootings. They wanted immediate access to their kids. So, we can invest in those pocket
Shoe hangers.
shoe hangers.
They're hangers.
Same idea, yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah.
And
Highborn Wood Shop make them. I'm just, it's just.
and go
putting
down
it
that
out.
road as a means to say, okay,
I think that's a
we
possibility.
value learning time.
I like the idea where it's still, the coach comes and says you have 2 minutes till.
I'm sorry, I'd like to maybe get some feedback from teachers from like all the
Yes.
different buildings, because this kind of a thing, I
This is
think
deep.
affects
This is
Oh,
deep.
different
Yeah.
buildings differently. Obviously, I think the students in the high school
And-
probably are a little more screen attentive than the elementary. I know, like,
Even
my
middle
daughter's
school
at Moss Side in
skip-
6th grade.
yeah.
She has a phone.
Yeah.
She takes it to school every day, but as soon as she gets there, it stays in her locker.
Yeah, backpack or locker, whatever.
And I can actually look and I can tell if her
Where
phone
it's at.
moves during the day and she doesn't get it for a week, which she's pretty good about it.
Show me how you do that. I'll use the.
Yeah, I showed you.
I know. So, I mean, this is an ongoing conversation that we can have specific to cell phones.
Which is-
Which I agree that can start at the administrative level. And I could bring it up at our next principal meeting.
I mean, this, John, what I'm saying is, we start like with the cyberbullying and all that. This is where I think we're trying to tie everything in with the uses that cause it.
It dovetails nicely.
Yes, so if you go to policy 249, bullying and cyberbullying, from our last meeting, we were kind of up in the air on wordsmithing some items, and I had Janet put together a recent revision as I'm moving through. Okay. Yes. You'll see at the top where it says recommended changes to policy, it's written out for cyberbullying, bullying. So we kind of broke it down by specifics as to what we were looking for. So if you get an opportunity just to read through these. And once again, it does have the designee, and that could be anyone related to Title IX and/or a compliance officer. So we have tweaked this policy to include information about the different forms of bullying.
We've kind of expanded the definition.
You got it,
of
you got
what
it.
bullying
We
is.
wanted to be a
And
little bit
what I'm
more
happy to
clear.
see is that
You remember
it's-
from your, yes,
The one phrasing that had been removed
Mm-hmm.
was involved a pattern of behavior repeated over time. That
Yes,
was at one
yes.
point removed. I'm happy to see that return, because I think that helps define number 4, which is that teasing is not bullying. Teasing sucks, but it's a different definition, it's a
Yes.
different issue.
so basically we have strengthened the wording on this policy to be a little bit more clear as to what we were trying to define. So if everyone could maybe look through that, if there are any questions as you read through that, please email me. But we would like to have this on, is it the 8th? January 8th, study session, for 30-day display,
2019.
2019.
A technical note, the
Yeah.
second number 1 there, it talks about verbal bullying. The proper term would be oral and/or verbal, because they're different. In other words, you could convey a message with your mouth by saying words, that's an oral attack, or you could do it with a writing instrument or a mobile phone. So those are words as well, but they're written words. So the proper.
Oral and/or verbal,
Or
Right,
written.
so that covers both.
slash
written.
written.
Well, verbal is
Yeah.
written.
And it's
Oral's
interesting
with the mouth.
because the constant change and updates with social media and everything going on. This is to be reviewed, looked at every 3 years.
Okay.
So we're going to be constantly
I agree.
examining this.
And I think the goal is to, with the kind of more expansive definition of what the issues are,
We can add to
and
it.
because the investigation and the decision on discipline and consequences are, subjective. And we can, based on the severity, I think the idea of this is to find things as they're developing and to prevent it from getting to a, coming to a hammerhead, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like it, I like the language.
Okay. Volunteers. We've been at this one for a couple months here, and Trish, we had asked Trish at our last meeting to maybe reach out to some school districts to see if they have any difference of opinions, procedures, protocols related specifically to boosters, as we heard from the band booster parents. So, Trish, if you want to summarize where we're at, and
It opened up a lot of discussion between districts. The majority of people, it was split. Some people considered boosters volunteers, others had never even thought of them. Going out and looking at different websites, I did only find so far one policy that does address boosters, and so I did print that off, and we can have that to look at. People have to remember, though, that PDE doesn't require that. It's up to the districts to determine what we want our people to have. And I know there was a lot of discussion about the time and the cost involved, and that's why our old policy did not require people who were working in concession stands or the parking lots to have clearances, because at that time it cost them approximately $48. They had to pay $28 for their FBI, $10 for their PA, $10 for their state. So that's a lot to ask of a person, especially if they're volunteering their time. Once the state recognized that,
for
and
maybe
they,
if it's a football game, 5 games out of a year, I'm just saying.
well, for anybody, especially when you're asking them to donate their time. And the state recognized that, and that's when they changed it to where volunteer clearances are free for all except for the FBI, and they came up with the form, if you're a resident for 10 years, you can waive that. So it opened a lot of discussion, and we're going to continue that discussion in January. We all agree that the safety of our students is paramount and first, and since it does not require any cost to it, my personal belief is that we should always have all of our people have clearances. I mean, this is going to create a lot of extra work for our department, but that's okay. We'll figure that part out, and it's something that we can set up for our beginning of next year goal, where we set up meetings with booster organizations. If people had questions as far as they don't have access to computers, or sometimes it is a little bit hard to go through that process, we could start once a quarter or however often that we needed to have volunteer clearance workshops where they can come in here. We'll have computers set up. We'll kind of walk through, show them how to do it, tell them what they need to bring, so they'll have the information with them to be able to enter it, and we would be able to help them out with that.
Just because this came up recently with another discussion with the Santa Claus question, which, by the way, I might be pulled into that. I might get to play
Thank you for
Santa.
following.
Can you maybe just lay out, because I'm not sure, what would show up on the background check that doesn't show up on like a swipe at the door? Like, and what would be, when it comes to like boosters and things like that, what are we concerned about that wouldn't show up on a swipe?
Well, people have to recognize too, a swipe is not an independent thing. You have to have a person on the other side. So it's not like I can go swipe my driver's license in and then have access. You still have to have a person on the other side to read the information that pops up. So that's not a foolproof thing. That you need to have 2 people with it. It also only checks one system, which is why the state requires 3. Originally, we all thought, why can't just the FBI clearance work? Because you would think that that would encompass all of them. And what we found out is that those communities do not talk to each other. That sometimes things are on the state are not reported to the FBI, and vice versa. So that's why we have to have both. we have seen instances where we'll see something on the state and not on the FBI, or vice versa. So if you limit it to just the one, and the driver's license check only checks for child abuse. It does not check for any of the other factors.
Okay.
Okay, another question. The TB test had also come up.
Yes.
What,
That is where.
Again, that's one of the things the board can make that determination. It is not required, but we also have the right and the option to require all of our people to have any additional standards that we reflect that we need.
So this was put in place. However, if, as a board administration, we want to
Yeah,
re-examine. the
I'm
TB.
obviously, I'm open to arguments against the idea, but I have a tough time
We have talked
removing
about
that.
Yeah.
and, removing a safeguard, that protects the health and well-being of the students. I understand, I completely understand, I've had them done. My wife gets them done. They're a pain, they're time consuming, and it's a lot to ask of somebody who we're already asking to give
Yeah.
time. But again, I can't see removing that safeguard for the sake of convenience.
well.
So I would say we keep that in, but again, I'm open to, obviously, anybody in the committee, anybody on the board, or in the public,
Well, Dr.
that wants to make any comments, opposing that, I'd be more than willing to listen.
Like you say, it's a pain going and get it done. I know with my job, we have a day that we could go, they'd come in to a certain facility, all the employees can come in, get their test, and then they will meet, it's whether, I don't know if you could have something set up with the hospitals that even doctors' offices can do it. So,
Bring them on site,
correct.
which is not a bad idea if we do that twice a year.
Correct.
Once,
For fall, once for spring.
where I was going, yeah.
Activities. That's a good idea, Bob.
I mean, I know there's people that are
TV
willing
corral.
to do this.
and we have our school doctor, I can't think of his name right now.
We could set up maybe where the original and
Yes.
work with our nursing department to see if that was something that they would be able to.
Even if
be-
it's
a
the
contractual thing,
location
we'll have to.
here in the boardroom, people come in, we sign them up, TV test, and send the results. I mean, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. And I think if we do that, we can actually even combine, have somebody from staff in here helping them fill out the
Do the
clearances.
volunteer workshop.
So they
All-
come in, it's a
all in one.
one-stop shop. They come in,
Twice a year.
want to volunteer, and
Yeah.
they come out with their clearances started, and their TV tests started.
I think
And
it's
then, whenever it's time to come back, hopefully those clearances come back by then, and then I think should be efficient.
Rick, I
The
took,
problem is
And then-
setting the date, and
good. And that puts
Hurting those
everyone,
cats.
because that ties into what we do with our boosters. Mrs. Estock sends out the letter to the boosters indicating, okay, who's on the board, the boosters, all paperwork has to be submitted. And then we can inform them of, okay, if we're going to set this up in August 1, right before the fall camps for band, soccer, etc., forces them to have the list of boosters and their roles for which they would want to complete during the season. Meaning if they're in the pit, working the concession stands, etc. What do you think, Trish?
And then you do probably have a lot of boosters who do not work directly with the kids, so those would not need any of the clearances or TB. We could look at their role that they do and define, yes, this one needs it, no, this one doesn't.
I think just logistically where that gets hairy is there's so many of them, it's hard to track.
But the nice
Okay,
part.
you came in as
And
this,
they-
but
yeah,
now,
yeah,
you
you're gonna
need it
shift.
over
Yeah,
here.
you'll need it enough.
You know what I mean? It's
So if there
That's
is
just
that
dark area.
possible group of people that maybe bumped around and get everything,
Yeah.
TV, everything, come on in.
And then we would already have a database set up of anybody who comes in. If you volunteered or a booster for football, you would automatically be set up to be. If you're a booster for basketball, we would just
And you're good for
put them
everything.
together. And it would
And
be
now,
good for the 5
that was
years.
the TV test, we're saying that's across the board. Like,
Yes.
any kind of volunteer, regardless of
Which is
clearances.
currently in the policy.
The current policy is
Yes,
everybody gets
yes.
a TB test. So if we then, and again, this is not a decision, this is an
This is all-
idea.
We're brainstorming.
if we're able to set up this kind of workshop idea
Yes.
where we have a date where everybody comes in and gets put through, I think at that point, I think it would be safer to say we can then have everybody go through the clearance process. And then all those logistics down the road become non-existent because now you're cleared to do anything.
Correct.
And there's not anything that would prohibit them from doing it. We'll supply the computers, give them the access, be there with them to show them what they need to enter if they have any questions.
Yeah.
We did the same thing for some of our employees when we had to do that in 2015.
What I would suggest is because again, it's asking people for their time, it's another, it's a day that they have to come give their time, which they would have to do for the TB test anyway. But we have a large number of volunteers. And a large number of new volunteers every year, I would assume. So getting them all to agree on a date is impossible. So I would just recommend that we have a date and then a makeup date in mind as well.
And it may be that we find a Saturday may be best for everyone, because, you don't want to interrupt work schedules for the public, and we could set this up on a Saturday, similar to what we've done in the past with registration, when it gets crazy and people start coming in.
So I went out to the CDC's websites, that's the Centers for Disease Control, NCHS, National Center for Health Statistics. They analyze these types of statistics so they can offer recommendations nationwide. And based on what I was able to see, if you take the population of the United States and divide it up by the population that exists in Pitcairn and Monroeville, we can assume that there is 1 or 1.5 or 2 people in this population here that has TB. They may or may not know about it. So let's say there's one in Monroeville,
Okay,
Pitcairn.
I gotcha.
So it's about 30,000 people. So if some of those people come to the game and cough or breathe on somebody, which is because TB is communicated in an airborne manner, then we have trouble. So what we have to do, what the board needs to do, is analyze the exposure to the risk versus the impact of someone contracting TB. Since it's very troublesome to have TB, it weighs on the volunteers, all volunteers and all teachers, all nurses, everyone, to get a TB test. So that one person doesn't come, spread that, and then students get tuberculosis.
Potentially, that individual could be in a refreshment stand, or
They could be visiting from another country, they come over here, they want to see their grandson play, they come to the game and they cough. Okay, so what we're saying is, of course, we can't control everyone outside Monroe and Pitcairn, but the danger is high enough that I think we would do well to err on the side of being extra vigilant on this. That's all. And yes, it's going to be difficult, but let's just do it anyway.
okay. So
That's my recommendation. We haven't decided, but we need the folks in the public to weigh in on this as well.
I agree.
and we've heard from constituents and boosters. As a committee here, we'll make some recommendations to the board as a whole. But I think some of these ideas are positive in nature to assist our boosters and volunteers with.
Brainstorming ways to
Richard, I'm
administer,
gonna get you.
administer it, right.
Yes, to make this process easier and palatable for everyone.
I'm going to ask a question here, just ask
That's
Mrs.
a good
Crum.
idea.
We're worrying about
Saturday, 2 days. Or
the volunteers, boosters, whatever, but we're not taking into account our teachers. They get,
we had that conversation, Bob.
They get the TB test upon
Upon
hire.
hiring, yes.
correct, so you have somebody that's with students. I know this is coming off the thing,
Now-
but
now,
we're still
it's-
talking about the TB.
Great
Yes, and I'm
segue, right.
piggybacking
Yep.
off of what you're thinking, Val, is because with the recent legislative changes with clearances and updating those, is that something this board perhaps would want to consider with TV for all employees, whether or not that's 5 years, 3 years, whatever? Trish, thoughts?
If we were to do it, my recommendation would be 5 years, because that ties in everything. You know that your clearances and your TB test will be due at the same time. If you do
Right.
anything other than that, then they have to watch 3 years on this, 4 years on
Yeah, and
that.
it becomes,
Uh,
So
with-
that way it segues
With
together.
volunteers currently, is it a one-shot deal? They
No.
have to do it every year?
yearly.
No, they don't, I don't believe they do it yearly. They do it when their clearances expire. And I will double check to
For like
verify
a
that.
volunteer?
Yes.
For like
It's almost like
boosters?
a new packet, but I will
Okay.
verify that to make sure.
So a
So
new
maybe we
volunteer
make it
coming in.
5 years
If,
then.
if we implement this workshop idea.
Mm-hmm.
The new volunteer coming in would have to show up here on a Saturday, what have you, go through it once, and then they're good for 5 years,
5 years.
for all types of volunteering.
They would be added then to the
Okay. So
database.
I think, given the different ideas that popped up today, I think it's really constructive.
Yeah, it really
I
is.
think some really good ideas have come out of this. Potentially, some problems are gonna arise, and hopefully the public can make us aware of them, you know, the complaints or whatever, but I think obviously we need to keep looking at this policy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, before anything hits the agenda.
Yes,
All right, so
yeah.
we're-
Yeah, we're not ready yet
Right.
to push it out on the 8th.
Brainstorming one extra step, it might be as easy as the board designating the Human Resources Department to print up a certificate that can be given to all the volunteers. That certificate taken to Forbes or UPMC or the local doc, whoever it is, and they give it to UPMC, they get the TB test, they go back a couple of days, whatever, you know. So this is a way for the local hospitals and local docs to serve the community in a volunteer-based way by performing this test, because it's a scratch test.
Well,
It's
I
very
think
easy.
the idea,
Just
John,
bring
that
them in
we,
here.
is have that one doctor come in here and knock all of them out in one time.
That's one way to do it. This is
Right.
another way to
Yeah.
do it, so
Right.
there's no reason why we couldn't do both. I don't know.
No, I
but
agree. If you
we're
can't make it
looking
to the
for-
meeting, here's, you know, the way to do it otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. I like it.
Whatever works.
I just feel, you know, we're worrying about volunteers, but, you know, we have our teachers and administrators that are around kids daily. And
Yeah, I agree. I agree. The last policy, 123R, and this is administrative regulations that
I don't see
We-
anything in the back there.
cheerleading's not in here?
Oh, wait, maybe that is.
Yeah, it is.
Yep,
It's
I'm
last
sorry.
Okay. These are regulations from cheerleading that has been in place. Val, do you have any history on this as far as how long this,
I have no idea how long, but.
probably 10 years. I can remember Mrs. Neely being on the school board, and I think she's been up for a while, so,
Yeah, there's just with my period of time being on here, there has been some issues that come up, and I know one of the other coaches has questioned Mr. Avesti and Dr. Short, and I said, put your thoughts into what your changes you would like, and this is what they did. There's too many gray areas, and they're picking apart what they can and what they can't do. So if it's in written form, all you have to do is go to it and say, this is policy. So, you don't have the updated from what I can see.
that was the one that Randy had submitted.
Correct.
So what we're looking at here is the current.
That's the current.
Current
This is the
regulation.
current one. I have the updated with the changes they want. If we go to,
You want to review those?
yeah,
Or can we make a copy of that, Trish? Randy had just sent us
yeah, they had,
today, I think, the revisions for that.
yeah, they came in. That's why I just wanted to get it on here, so it's out there. He had sent it also to the church.
Boosters, just to inform them
GCBC.
that this was going to be discussed tonight as well.
It's, it's a lot of discussion that goes on back and forth, and with the amount of kids that you have involved in this, something has to be set, because there's always a loophole that they're trying to get around. I mean, as far as practices, as far as tryouts, just everything. You'll see when we get this thing
Do we,
back.
do we have similar policies with any of the other activities and sports and whatnot? Like, do we lay out how Coach Hall is supposed to dictate who makes the team and who doesn't?
No.
So I'm just wondering why cheerleading is specifically kind of,
Only because
Listed separately.
historically, there has been multiple debates, conflict with how teams have been selected, whether or not coaches are involved in the process because they may be biased. Some parents at one point in time wanted to grandfather, and I'm not sure if that's in there, that, okay, if my child makes the squad as a 10th grader or 11th grader, they're automatically on the squad as a senior. With the PIAA acknowledging and now recognizing cheerleading as a sport, and they do have the championships at the state level, teams have to then designate whether or not they're going to be a competitive cheer team. Gateway has not done that. So we're basically a cheerleading organization. We don't have competitive cheer. However, if we begin to cross those lines, that policy of, or regulation, if my child makes the squad as a junior, to grandfather into making the squad as a senior, to me, thank you, I could see Rick.
I just don't see how any of this is a board topic.
It is.
This is a coaching
No.
topic, and this is an athletic.
Totally agree.
topic.
Totally
This
agree.
is, I think this is completely out of our scope.
However, it is in the ARs, the regulation, and we want to ensure that this is being followed. And the reason why, part of the reason why this was brought up, maybe I should not, I'm not going to talk
Yes,
publicly
don't.
about this right
Correct.
now. But there was a situation that came forward that involved a decision that was made that did not follow this. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
All right, so Rick, let's go back to your question here.
Yes.
Should the board weigh in on cheerleading? There are two branches to that, competitive cheerleading and non-competitive cheerleading. So what is your recommendation for each of those two branches? Should the board weigh in on competitive cheerleading?
I think the board would have to weigh in on the decision to go competitive, is that correct?
If the cheerleaders decide that they would like to go competitive, of course, that would be brought to the board. And we would say, we're gonna move forward with the board vote.
I
to do
think
so.
outside of that, whether it's competitive and then a sport, or non-competitive and then an activity, I think the cheerleading should fall under the same regulations and same policies as every other sport does.
And I think that's where,
Follow?
I agree.
historically, these regulations came into play. The teams that were judged and then created. The process had to be written down to ensure that there was no, we'll say, collusion,
It was done fairly.
Don't use that word.
That it was done fairly.
that it was done fairly. And what I mean by that is, outside judges have been brought in for, I want to say, the last 20-plus years, from approved certified organizations, UCA, and there's another one. So we bring in judges who really are from around the area, but not specifically to Gateway. And then they judge. Every child is wearing the same outfit. They're given a number, no names. The judges record, they solidify, and then the actual scores are posted. That is what this process is in place for, to ensure. that it's being done.
I think
I know what you're
that's a
saying.
great process. I support it 100%. I just don't think it needs to be a policy. I think it's absurd that we're discussing this as a board. You know what I mean? I think, because
You haven't
again,
said
we
why.
don't
You've said
make.
twice that you think it's absurd.
It is, because this
Why?
is not, this should not reach the board. This
This should not reach the board because,
because it's not a board decision. This is
why
a
is it not a
coaching.
board decision?
Because we don't make these same policies for football, for basketball, none of these, we don't have.
What Rick's saying is.
We don't step in as a board and tell our
The
basketball
coach
coach
determines.
how to determine who starts, who plays what position, and how to run
That's
this
the
team.
nugget.
And
That's
who's on
what's.
the team?
We establish how they're going to do this and whether we approve in the interview process.
Right.
When we're looking at a coach, we say, all right, what's your idea about, how are you going to run this team? If it's something that the district doesn't agree with, we don't hire him. We don't bring a guy in and say, well, this is how you're going to determine your cut policy. This is the offense we want you to run. You know what I mean? We're going to demand that you run a 5-2 because we like the 5-2 monster with the slant and pinch.
Right, on the flip side, at the other branch, that is the non-competitive clubs or activities such as the rifle club, the speech club, the chess club, the robotics club.
Rifles
The-
club.
The
Women
board
have
does
that.
not create policies saying who shall be the lead robotics
Very similar to what you-
builder.
you're
Right,
talking about
who
here
shall
is-
be shall you be grandfathered in if you win a chess match in your junior year, will you automatically be on the team in senior? We don't know about that, we don't care about it, it can't be a policy, it has to
For the
be
Gateway
the club
Musical.
leader.
Correct.
We have the director, the choreographer get together and determine the roles based off of the tryouts of the individuals.
The best the board could do is say they have to be a student at Gateway District, that's it.
And follow under the GPA
All the
policy, which is
That's
in here.
legitimate. The other
Which
parts
is
are-
with
I
the
agree.
extra-
This
Extracurricular,
basically explains the procedures for tryouts. They wanted to put something in writing based on the dynamic of cheer and the procedures in place.
If your daughter wants to be a cheerleader, I'm just telling you. That's why I had voice.
I don't, at this point, I don't think that's in my.
Okay, so let's summarize, where are we
All
here?
right,
I'm
so
sorry, just the
can I
dynamic
just
of cheer.
summarize the recommended procedural changes
Okay.
to this?
If you're looking at this, we're starting on page 2, which, okay, we're not doing it. They want to eliminate, they just, not saying how they're going to judge. They went up to, but no less than 3 judges. There were 5. They want to eliminate using worksheets for tabulation. A lot of the problems were too, like Dr. Short said, with the grandfathering in, with the sport now becoming more active as far as tumbles and lifts and everything. A lot of kids aren't going to gym classes, taking acrobatics. They can't do
The advanced,
correct. So they are losing points because that is on the tryout sheet. Yes, Rick, I know you're holding your head, but we went through an awful lot prior to
I
tryout.
understand that, but shouldn't they lose points if they can't do,
But is it required to be, when you say a cheerleader, in my days, I'm just saying a cheerleader cheered. We weren't required to do all the tumbling, the
right.
acrobatics.
As a football player, I wasn't required to run a 4.340.
And times
But if I
have
did,
changed.
man, I got a lot better, I was a lot better
But
off
I'm
as far as
saying,
the cut.
but see, then it's costing too for a parent to put their child to learn all these techniques. So, do you know what I'm following?
I do, and I understand the issue there, but again, if this is what the cheerleading coach and Randy want to do, fine. I just don't think it belongs on our table.
I'm just, since it's been a policy, this is why it was.
Well,
brought
I
to the
personally
table.
would like to see
And
the policy go
understand,
away.
this is just a regulation. This is something like, similar to like the wellness thing that we would just agree to change. It's not necessarily a 30-day display. However, they want it, knowing that tryouts will be quickly approaching, they wanted to get something up to date
Correct.
and informational. So if we're all in agreement, we can add this and
I personally, I'm thinking I'm probably going to make a motion at the next meeting, and I will obviously have it written out and give you notice, to eliminate or at least table this policy until we have written a similar policy for every single sport and every activity that Gateway has. Otherwise, I think we're being uneven and unfair. I think we're being a little heavy-handed, and I'm not sure why it's cheerleading in particular. I think we should leave it up to the coaches and to our athletic director to decide what's fair and what the policies are. And if there is a problem with that, If a parent decides that there's something unfair there that the coach is doing, she takes it, she first approaches the coach, then she goes to the athletic director, then she goes to the principal, then she goes to the superintendent. Then, if nothing can be solved there, then maybe it comes to the board. I think we're jumping a lot of steps here.
Well, I'm just saying, is there a way to eliminate, to take this out of policy?
Yeah, I think I have it right here. Let me see if I can finish up one
I mean, would
sentence.
that be the wise thing to do?
Let me see if
I think it's the only thing to do until we
123.
apply a similar policy to every sport, which
Oh, I-
obviously we know we're not gonna do.
Correct.
So here's the policy. Let me see if I can get a policy. Okay, the recommendation is that non-competitive cheerleading coaches desire to establish a schedule of participation evaluations and measurements. So the board could make a policy along those lines that says, the board,
We're listening also.
Yeah, go ahead, John, we're listening.
policy could be, the board does not object to coaches and leaders establishing evaluations and measurements for clubs and activities in the district. That is, instead of saying a positive statement, we do not object to the negative. So that's a way to open the door, and like Rick said, not be heavy-handed. We do not object to them setting up their rules.
Absolutely. If this wants to be how they determine who's on and what they do,
Right.
I don't see anything
So
objectionable
that
here.
keeps us out of it.
I don't
and
know
hands-
anything
Right.
about cheerleading to make these decisions.
Yes.
That's why we have a cheerleading coach.
You would
and
be
an athletic
looking
director.
at eliminating the regulation. The policy itself is interscholastic athletics, which
Right, but
just
there's
kind of
that little,
highlights.
there's
yeah,
that
right.
attachment.
Yeah, these right here,
Right.
you'd be looking at eliminating.
Yeah, I mean, right here, it's kind of a conflict.
Each
Is it
team
the
will be
number of
determined by the
participants
coaching staff.
by the coaching staff. Yeah, and I mean,
Based on the needs and limitations of the sport.
the evaluation of
Player.
players and fair, so
The
our
coaching
policy
staff
flat out dictates it's up
says
to the
that.
coach. And then we pull out cheerleading and say, well, you
Right
don't
here,
get to do
yeah.
that.
Well, this is what I'm saying, to eliminate this policy from gateway policy.
Yes.
Regulation. We're confusing regulation with policy.
Because
Correct.
regulations,
That portion
I'm
of the
saying.
Yeah,
policy.
you
Correct.
definitely want to keep this.
regulations are set by the board, they can be added.
We can
Right.
revise this since the last time was 2006.
Yeah, I
We
think,
could beef it up to where you want.
yeah.
Does that make sense? I know where you're
You
Makes
going.
sense.
you agree with that?
Oh, I do. I'm saying this was just brought to the board,
No,
so
that's fine.
this, we looked at it, and that this is the recommended through the policy committee right now, till you take it to the board to see their feelings, and then,
So John, if you actually pull up policy 123, exclusive, 123, you'll see it, and then there's the regulations underneath to take a look at.
Okay.
Okay?
It's the first attachment.
Yeah, first attachment.
Is what we see here in the
Yeah,
packet.
and that is what we'd be looking at, just saying, hey, look, it
Just-
still falls on the coaches.
Yes.
Which is right there.
Yeah, I mean, we just eliminate that.
Eliminate that.
Make everybody aware
Yep.
that that's eliminated, and it's gonna be a coaching decision.
which
Okay.
is, I think, because tryouts are coming up in 2
Yeah.
months, and they wanted something in place.
And I hope none of my comments, I don't
No,
mean to
because-
belittle anything cheerleading wise. I love that we have so many kids that wanna do it, and I love that we have coaches that wanna volunteer and do it.
And that's currently still in place.
Right.
Unless we eliminate, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Val, I think we can all agree, we had a lot of our time taken up this past year with cheerleading issues.
Oh, I know.
You
And
know what I
that's
mean?
why I wanted to bring
I
this
had more
up.
emails,
I know.
10-1 about cheerleading than I did our $80 million budget.
I understand that.
So, that's a little disconcerting.
And that's why I wanted to bring this, they've talked to me, and I says, your
Good.
changes, we bring it, this is what we do.
Well, if it's all right with Rich, it's all right with us.
Okay.
Rich, we good?
Rich, what's good?
Yeah, that matters.
There is a basketball game at 7:30.
Okay.
We done?
All right. Motion to adjourn, we don't have to vote on that, I guess.
Public comment, Richard?
Yes.
All right.
This is about security.
Yes.
I don't know if you're aware of it, but 2 out of the last 4 days of one year school, you had no security at that school.
We are
I don't know
aware,
who's handling the scheduling, but,
we are aware.
yeah, you were. I guess the girls got sick or medical, but 2 of the last 4 days, it was no security at one of your elementary schools.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay.
All right. That would be it then. Calling it 7:05. Exactly 1 hour.